Hello, everyone. So we'll get started. Thank you for joining the webinar on basics of photography. It's actually part two. Atul already conducted a session on art and science of photography. I'll give a short introduction of Atul. So Atul is an IT professional, and he's following photography as a hobby. But it's been many years. He's pursuing the same. Uh, he will guide us through some of the tips, and also he'll share his experience with us, so that if we want to pursue photography as a passion or a hobby or a career, and it would be helpful. So yeah, over to you, Atul.
Hey thanks for the intro. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Atul, I can hear you. Yeah.
All right, I think let's just get started. So, like Om mentioned, this is part two of the uh, introduction to photography series. So, this is slightly more technical, but I will try to make it as interesting for all the people involved, and we will see if we can delve into more than just photography, since there are maybe people who are not really pursuing photography as a hobby per se. But just to get a sense, like I know quite a few of the people who are on, but let's just quickly get started. And right, so I wanted to get started with how a camera works, right? So maybe to just kick things off, like could somebody maybe use the chat window or unmute yourself and kind of type in, or like what do you think when I say camera, right? What comes to mind? Could somebody like maybe put in some words of what you think a camera is? Like what is the thing that you kind of associate a camera with?
um, Kind of, if we want to capture something, whatever is in front of us, then uh, that is
Yep.
good. uh,
So
so
that is more to do with photography. But like when I say camera, right, what do you think of? Do you think of a DSLR? Do you think of your phone? Like what do you think of?
I think of my mobile, which I have.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I see like people saying DSLR. Okay, fair enough. So let's look at it, right? So all the cameras, right? So I've kind of randomly picked up some cameras. So there is the Nikon entry level camera. There is a $6,000 Sony mirrorless camera. Then there's the iPhone, and then there is this Hasselblad, which is used in satellites, right, by NASA. All of them essentially work on the same principle. So they are essentially the same piece of technology, same piece of equipment. Obviously, all of them have variations in price, variations in features, but at its core, all cameras work on the same principle. So people who have been to, class 9 physics, 10 physics would kind of remember this diagram. It has basically a convex lens. A light enters, it converges at a point, and the distance from where the lens is to where that image is invertedly formed is called the focal length, right? I'm assuming everybody has seen this, right, at some point or the other in their life.
Right, Atul.
Yeah. All right. So this is essentially what a camera does, right? It has a lens, the lens that you see here, the lens you see here, the lens you see here. And it has basically all the light enters, and then it converges at a point where there is some sort of a light capturing instrument, and that image gets formed, right? So now if you look at like a DSLR, right? So this is how the DSLR works. There is a light that enters. There is a mirror here. It reflects the light up. There is a pentaprism here, which puts that image into the optical viewfinder. So when you look through the viewfinder, and this is the viewfinder, if anybody is wondering, like when you see photographers put where the eye is, right? Uh, so basically, what you're seeing then is a reflection of the what the camera is essentially seeing, right? That is what you're kind of seeing. When you press the shutter button, what happens is that this mirror flips. So maybe I'll draw it out. It will be easier. So this mirror flips upwards, and this light then directly goes and hits this sensor here. So this is the image sensor, which is a photosensitive sensor, and the light hits this and the image is formed. You have nowadays mirrorless cameras, which are like the Sony series and Nikon, Canon, all of them have it. They do away with this entire bit of circuitry, right? They don't do this physical mirror and movement, and that is why they're called mirrorless, where there is an electronic shutter. So what you are seeing here is an electronic image, similar to how you would see it on your phone, right? So when you point your phone at something, what you see is essentially what you get. So what you see in a mirrorless camera out of the viewfinder is essentially an electronic representation of the scene. And when you press the shutter, that gets captured onto the sensor. So that bit is exactly the same, irrespective of whether you're on a phone or like I said, a Hasselblad. The only thing, whether it actually has a reflexive mirror here, is what kind of terms something as a DSLR vis-a-vis a mirrorless. Does that make sense? Were you able to follow?
Yeah, Tulya, we are able to.
Okay. Any questions? Like any questions why
Yeah.
there are? Yeah.
So my question is, does it improve anything? Because I've been seeing a lot of mirrorless cameras these days, and they are like more
Yeah.
expensive. So do
Yes.
they improve anything?
Yes. Uh, yes. So mirrorless, right? So two things, right? I mean, if you look at this camera and this camera, you will see, for one, the size is extremely small. So mirrorless cameras, because they don't have to have these moving parts, right? What happens is the size is essentially very, very small, right? So it's easier to carry. Typically with a DSLR, what happens essentially is that it is large and then you decide not to carry it. And like they say, like the best camera you have is the one that is in your hands, right? So mirrorless cameras are typically smaller. So you will end up carrying them more. The other advantage of mirrorless, because they don't have these physical movements happening, typically they have very high frame rates. By that, what I mean is the number of frames that they capture per second are typically much higher than what maybe a equally priced DSLR might get, right? Say if you're shooting photograph, say sports, right, and you want to get like that moment when the ball hits the uh, header, or somebody does a header, right, and that you want to get the ball hitting somebody's head exactly, right? So you're not going to be able to time it, right? You're not going to be able to time it. So what do, right? They start shooting much before the ball's going anywhere near the head, with the anticipation that one of those shots will have the ball hitting the head, right? Now, if you get, say, 3 shots per second, there is a chance you might miss it. But if you get, say, 15 shots per second, the chances of you getting that exact shot are higher. So if you are into that kind of photography, mirrorless makes sense. Uh, like do you want me to answer this? For weddings, mirrorless makes sense, because mirrorless, and I will get to computational photography in a bit, but mirrorless are essentially similar to your phones, right? So typically they have more, I will say, intelligence built into it. So to give an example, Sony, and others are also catching up, do something known as eye autofocus. So they will, keep track of, say, for example, the eye of a bird or the eye of the groom or the bride, right? So you don't need to, so it will automatically get that focus without you having to do it, right? So it kind of helps you focus on other things rather than trying to get everything in focus, right? So that is something that the Sonys are doing really well nowadays. uh, One of the like interesting things that you can do as a wedding photographer with a Sony, for example, is you can feed faces of the bride, the groom, the father of the bride, like 4 5 photos, so that in a group photo the camera will make sure that those people are in focus, right? So I mean, it is getting there, but I will talk about computational photography in a bit. But those are the advantages. Now, on the flip side, the disadvantages of a mirrorless really are, like, if you look at the image that I've put here, right? Once you put a big enough lens, it's no longer small. So it really depends on what lens. So because the lens is not much smaller and not less heavier than what would be on here, so it's no longer small once you put a really professional grade lens. And then once you put a heavy lens here, a heavier body balances better. So I don't know if that makes sense, but when you pick it up, you will realize that a heavier body will balance better with
Yeah,
yeah.
I've picked it up, and that
Yeah.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. The other disadvantages which are being overcome, obviously, because of everything being electronic, right? The batteries are not the greatest. So you will need maybe one or two spare batteries. The grip that you get, so if you have large hands, a small mirrorless camera is harder to grip because you have to, like, the grip, because the form factor is small, it is harder to grip. Whereas a proper DSLR will be easier to grip. Typically, Sony's menus are really, really bad. So again, like, I don't want to get into a camera comparison, but yeah, I mean, there are pros and cons. They are costlier. If you're just starting off, I would recommend getting second-hand DSLR and starting off rather than spending too much money getting a mirrorless and getting into that world right now, because it's in a flux. So Canon, Nikon, everybody is catching up to Sony. So maybe in a year or so it will stabilize. So right now may not be the greatest time to get into like buying a full blown setup right now. Okay. Right. I have already eaten into 15 minutes of my time, so I will quickly run through this. This is how a sensor really works. What a sensor does, right? A sensor is basically a photo sensitive piece of silicon that is sitting behind the lens, right? So where you previously had a film, you now have a sensor. This is the visible range of light, right? So there is radio, microwave, infrared, again, class 9 physics. This is the only bit that human beings see. So if you had radio waves, you could see through walls. If you had X-rays, you could see through flesh, but you can't, because this is the only spectrum that you see. So you see red, you see green, and you see blue, right? So what happens is there is this photosensitive material that is the sensor. Typically, the sensor only captures, so the photosensitive material only captures, think of it like a bucket, right? Again, I'm going to go into some physics here. Photons come and hit the sensor, and the photons become electrons, right? And the electrons is what is measured as the intensity of light, right? So one photon came, one electron is in my bucket, right? Another came, another one is in my bucket. So now I say it is 2 electrons is the voltage that is available in this 1 megapixel. So this is the pixel that we talk about, right? So this is the photo site. So whatever has been captured, so I have now 2 electrons. So this is how it typically works. But we don't, so that is then grayscale, right? That is just telling me what is the contrast. It is not giving me color. So for getting color, what companies do is that they add a filter on top of each of these photo sites. So when I say photo site, I mean this square here, right? So on top of this, there is a physical filter. So if you now look at a cross section of that photo site, it basically looks like this. So the red photo sites will have a red filter on it. And so when red, green, blue light hits it, only red enters, right? So this photo site only registers the color red. So it will say, okay, one electrode, well, 1 electron for red. This will say, okay, 2 electrons for green, and this will say 3 electrons for blue. Get it? Did I make sense, or did I completely lose everybody?
I think it makes sense. Yep.
Okay, so what does that mean, right? So that means when you buy a 30 megapixel camera or a 48 megapixel camera, right? They are not actually 40 megapixels. What it is it is getting divided into red, blue, and green, right? And because human beings see green more, so we are more prone to see green. This is the Bayes layout. There are other layouts. So Fuji, for example, uses a different layout, but this is the most common layout where you have in a square square of 9, you have 4 green, which is the predominant color, and then the reds and the blues are equally distributed. So 25% red, 25% blue, and 50% green. That is how the Bayer array is set up, right? So, okay, so what does that mean, right? Again, it means that each pixel, so this essentially, you will have 7 red, 7 blue, and 15 green, right? So this is the color that your sensor is actually capturing. Okay. I hope I have not lost everybody. I will get to more interesting photography stuff. I just thought this would be of interest to if people really want to understand what is happening behind the scenes, right?
Right.
Now,
It actually helps understand.
yeah, thanks. So, thanks, Harish. So, if it is getting too much, let me know. I will move on. Yeah. So now there is something known as a demosaicing algorithm. I won't get into too much detail of it right now. There are multiple patterns of it. If anybody has done electronics engineering, do look it up. I'm sure you would have studied it. What is it doing, right? It reads the reading of each of these photo sites and comes up with a cumulative reading of the color. So what do I mean by that? So look at this image here. So the green, assume the 10s are all greens, right? So there was 10 here, 10 here, 10 here, and 5 here. And this was a red pixel. So the demosaicing algorithm will approximate what is the value of green here. Because when you look at an image, right, you don't see pixels of red, green, right? You see a range, right? So you see violet, for example, right, which is then say blue and yellow or something mixed, right? So you don't see only red, green, blue, right? So it is the job of this demosaicing algorithm to actually do this approximation and figure out what is the color that is actually being seen. I will leave it at that, but it is something to maybe Google out of interest purely from the algorithm perspective. So a scenario like this, right, could be an edge, right? It could be somebody's face, which is all a uniform color, and then this is an edge where something else has come up, right? So that is how the camera kind of understands what is happening. So it is looking at the intensity at all the pixels and saying that, okay, here now it has started falling off, so it is an edge. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So Atul, when we apply filter in like a lot of filter there today nowadays in editor, so this is what plays the role that I'm just trying to like no, okay.
No. So this is basically think of it like I will say the red filter allows everything else to pass through other than red, right? That is what it is doing. It is not essentially the filter on the image. So you are nowhere near actually creating an image right now. This is much before the JPEG is really created. So the total output of this, right, gets stored in something known as camera raw.
Okay.
Okay. So camera raw has all the luminosity values and the color values across the grid. What you get out of it as a JPEG really is a compressed version of this camera raw based on some algorithm which says that, okay, how do I now compress stuff? How do I say that, okay, the pixel to the left and the right are 10, the middle one should be 7, and create a face out of it, right? So that is what the JPEG image is. So that's a compressed version of what you're seeing. So this is just about capturing the color, the value of the color that is falling there. It is not right now capturing the image per se. What you are getting and what to which you apply an Instagram filter is a very like a later conversation. I'll maybe get to it if I get time to do that. Yeah.
This is like when the reflection is there on camera, whatever we are looking at. So these are the filters which will actually projection, whatever we see as a projection is result of this. No. Okay. So
So think of it like if you're wearing a pink colored glass, right? Then you will see everything as pink, right? So
right.
this is that glass on top of this sensor. So
Sense.
it will only capture red. So this now knows that what is the value of red,
Okay. Okay.
right? And this will only capture green. So it now knows how much green is there in the image.
Got it. Got it. Now I got it actually. Yeah.
Okay. So there is something known as computational photography, and I was alluding to it slightly before. There is something very common or similar about both of these photos. Does anybody want to venture a guess what it is? Since I said computational photography, and there are IT people on the call.
Yeah. Uh,
I think it's the post-processing of image that they which has been done on the like the original image. Is that related to that?
No, but it is close to that. But the post processing is not done by a human here, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's done by the
by
algorithm.
AI, right? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
done by the algorithm completely, right? So this is something that, for example, somebody with a DSLR and typically, like if I were to try and capture this, it is some effort to get the Milky Way sharp, and both of them are being captured by Pixel 4, right out of camera, right out of phone, without any editing. These are pictures that you can capture with the Pixel 4 right now, right? This one has its own technicality. I won't get into it right now, but look at this image, right? It looks like a very simple image, but if you try and capture this image, you will realize that it's a very complicated image because one, everybody is in a line. So you don't know where to focus, right? Do you focus here? Do you focus here? Do you focus here? Where do you focus, right? Everybody has different skin tones, but so what should be the amount of light that you need? So imagine if you're trying to put a studio light somewhere and trying to light this, like, will his face be in shadow? If I focus for the white skin, will the dark face be in shadow, right? So it's actually a very complicated photo when you look at it that ways. But what the algorithm is now doing, and this is right out of phone, is identifying that these 5 image faces are faces and they are subjects in this photo, right? And they need to be predominant subjects of this photo, right? So it is, what it is doing is it is brightening the faces selectively right out of the phone without consideration for the rest of the scene. So it is picked up the face and the skin and brightened it so that when you look at it, you see, oh, all the faces are clear. Pixel is giving me a good photo, right? That is what has happened. But if you say, for example, look at this area, right? This is dark now. So it has identified, okay, that is not part of the that's not part of the subject. I don't need to brighten it. So it has left it as it is. So that is the power of AI, right? There is a lot of things like here, the stars are pinpoint sharp. Typically to do this, you will need really expensive equipment, which will track the Earth's motion because the star and the Earth are moving. A pixel can do it because it knows where you are and accordingly adjust the sensor a pixel or half a pixel to adjust for the star's movement and the Earth's movement and get you a spin sharp star, right? So it's something that the camera, like you will really, really struggle to do in camera. You can do it, obviously people do it, but it is now made it accessible to a lot of people by just the mobile phone. So I just wanted to put it out there. But what it doesn't do, imagine I just wanted this guy's face in focus, right? I really don't care about these people. That's something that the pixel can't do. You get it? Like if I want to be creative with it, right? Then that's where the AI starts failing a bit and you need to start thinking through it, right? So what I wanted to cover in this session is more of how do you control these elements rather than letting the AI do it, if that makes sense, right? Like if I wanted all of this to be dark and only her eyes to be, predominantly visible, right? I mean, something like that, right? So that is not something that the phone will do right out of the box. I'm not saying the phone can't do, but the phone's or AI algorithm will not do it because they typically think that everybody wants clear, sharp photos of everybody in focus. Make sense?
Right. So Atul, what focus does? Like, can I focus at one place Does that help?
Focus when you are looking at a mobile, right, is where you normally touch on something, and then that becomes your focal point, right?
Mhm.
So typically, if you have used this, you might have say touched on his face as a touch screen, and you hope that everything is in focus, right? Now, Google's algorithm helps you do that. If you're using, say, a Realme, maybe it may not do it, and it might start blurring something right off here, right? And you might see some artifacts here, all those things, right? So that is the quality of the algorithm, really. So like, I don't want to get into an iPhone versus Google conversation here, but essentially that is the quality of the algorithm, the hardware and the software working together, if that makes sense. I will get to what focus is if I think I'm running slightly late, but I will try and get to that also. Right. So this is the shutter, right? I just wanted to put an image so you physically see what a shutter is. So there is that mirror that I talked about. The mirror flips up, the shutter moves out, the sensor is exposed. So this is how the shutter works. Is that clear? I mean, I hope that kind of pictorially tells you what it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see only Abhishek shaking his head, so I'm taking that as my cue to move on. So, right. So what is shutter speed, right? Shutter speed is the duration for which the shutter is open, right? So when I say shutter speed is 1 second, it means the shutter was open for a whole 1 second. This is obviously slow motion. So this is 1 second. So if you have this thing rotating, 1 second will give you this blur. 1/8 of a second will start making things, start stopping motion. And by the time you get into 1/60th, 1/600th of a second, 1 by 1/60th of a second, you will have stop motion. And all of them are showing up specifically, like you can see the details, right? So where does that get used? Is that clear? I mean, I hope people understood what shutter speed is, right? It's the speed at which that shutter moves. Is that clear? Like how long it remains open. That is what the shutter speed is.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like how long the shutter has to open to capture a picture, right? The minimum amount of time or something like that.
I would not say that. I will say it is the amount of time that the photographer has asked the shutter to be open, if that makes sense.
Oh, okay. Because in mobile phone camera, you cannot. I mean, generally you cannot.
You can.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I will get to that also. You can control the shutter on the mobile phone. Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. I will get to it, Abhishek. If I get time, I'm conscious I'm slightly running behind, but let me see if I can cover as much as possible. So something like this, right? Where I'm trying to freeze motion, right? So the eagle came in, it picked up a duck, flew away, there is water flying. Now, if I use a slow shutter, this is going to be blurred out, right? So I need to be at a very high shutter. So I need to be at like something at say 1 by 1, say 12/50th of a second or something like that to freeze this, right? So this is what you can do with a fast shutter. Make sense?
Yeah.
This is what you can do with a slow shutter. So if you see waterfalls, which are all silky smooth, all romantic, it's essentially a slow shutter being used to make it smoothen it out. So you're not seeing the water like you're seeing here, droplets. You're seeing it all milky smooth, hair-like. Yeah. This is basically a slow shutter at work.
So Atul, Nikhil here.
Yeah. Hey, Nikhil.
So we have seen a lot of images that people generally take, right? Like there's this huge lens and lens of roads that are visible with the street lights on, which you call the moving traffic. Those
Yeah.
are actually captured at slow shutter speed, right? And the ones where you're
Yes.
actually capturing a moment, like a dropping off the leaf, you'll require
Yes.
really high shutter speed to capture it sharply, correct?
Yes, correct. So, Nikhil, so what I would suggest, like I said, it's not like I don't want to give an impression that you need to know exactly what number you need to be at, right? It's not like that. So you don't need to know like, okay, I need to be at 1/80th of a second to get waterfall, right? But as you get started with it, right? So for example, I think I removed a photo, but say if you want to capture a Formula One car, right? And you want to stop the action there. That is say going at say 300 kilometers per hour, right? So there is going to be a shutter speed that you need to be at to freeze that action, right? So this eagle, for example, was flying really fast. So there is a shutter speed that you need to be bare minimum at to freeze it. And as you get into wildlife photography, you will automatically know that, okay, if it is an eagle, this is the range. If it is a hummingbird, which is really flapping very fast, this is the range, right? But there is no one number. So it's not like I need to have a chart in front of me and say, okay, hummingbird, this is the number.
Correct.
It's not like that, but there is a range that you need to be at.
So you know and be comfortable with that kind of range once you have more experience learning photography, you're saying.
Yes, and also unlike, say, for example, wildlife photography needs, like, this is like any other skill, right? It needs practice. So the more you practice, all these things will come easily to you. Anything like landscape, right? The things that I'm showing here.
Correct.
You have time, right? You can take a photo, look at it, figure out, okay, I need it to be more smoother, right? So you can adjust.
Correct.
Yeah? So these things you can adjust. Things like wildlife photography, people, sports, you need to practice. If you don't practice, you will miss the shot. Yeah.
All right. Yep. Thanks, Atul.
Yeah. There is a specific technique that I used here called, which I used for this auto ISO. I will, if I get time, if anybody's interested, I'll discuss that also. So the next thing I wanted to discuss is aperture, right? So I'm building up to something. So bear with me if these terms seem a bit alien. But any guesses on what an aperture is?
It's the equipment which which is connected to shutter, so that it.
Okay, so it is basically the opening of the lens, right? So how much does your lens open? It is basically that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So is it like how much does it open so that the light gets passed through?
Yeah. So if you look at if you look at the video, it kind of self-explanatorily explains what aperture is, right?
Yeah.
Aperture essentially is this diameter, right? Like what is the area? So where shutter speed was how long were you letting light in? Aperture is how much light are you letting in? That makes sense?
Okay, yeah.
So think of your eyes, right? When it is dark, your pupils dilate, right? Your pupils dilate and you let more light in, right? Look at a cat's eyes, right? When it is dark, the entire eye is black. Why? Because it is letting more light in. So that is the aperture, the lens, the eye's lens changing aperture, right? When it is very bright, you squint. You squint because you're making the aperture smaller, letting less light in. Make sense? So again, just so you understand, this is the entire area is called aperture. So the bigger the aperture, more light is going to come in. Yeah.
Okay.
So like I said, shutter speed is how long do you let light in? Aperture is how much light do you let in? Make sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Right. So aperture typically gets measured in these numbers. Again, don't get fixated. As you start using these will become second nature. But when it says f by f 1.4, right? What it really means is the focal length of the lens that you're using divided by 1.4. So that essentially is has a correlation to the area. So this is the diameter. And that has a correlation to the area that is there. Again, completely useless maths, not required to be known. What you need to understand is that it is inversely related. So 1.4 is a bigger aperture vis-a-vis f22, which is a smaller aperture, because it is divided by focal length and not unlike shutter speed where 1 second was longer than 1 by 1/60th of a second. Make sense?
Yeah.
Any questions?
No, Atul.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next question obviously is like, how does aperture then impact your image, right? So I've written some English here, but let's take a look at image, right? So this was taken at a really, really large aperture, right? So f2.8. So if you look at it, what is happening, right? Almost only this part is in focus. So I would have focused on the eye, like I said in my previous session, right? The eye is important. It brings the image to life. Focused on the eye. There is this thing called as the area of confusion. Look it up again. This is the area that is in focus essentially, and is perceptible to the human eye as being in focus. And then because it is f2.8, everything else falls off, right? So it's not even like maybe what, a centimeter, 2 centimeters, and then everything else falls off, right? And you can see nothing else. No, not even the ears are in focus anymore. Yeah. So this is what aperture does. The bigger your aperture is, the more, all that creamy background blur that you see often are because they're using really expensive, large aperture lenses. That is, and making lenses with large apertures makes them costly because a lot of glass involved, and that is why the lenses are huge. Not lengthwise, but like widthwise, huge is because of the apertures being, and they're really, really heavy. So you get lenses which are like 5 kgs, 10 kgs because of the apertures being at this range. Make sense?
Yep.
So this image, right? Now, what did I want here? I did not want only say like this shallow depth of field key, like only this much water is in focus and everything else then falls off, right? I mean, doesn't make sense, right? So in a landscape, what are you trying to do? You are trying to get as much in focus as possible. Yes.
Right.
So you use a smaller aperture. So you use something like f13 or something. You will get enough depth of field, and you will get more things in focus. Make sense?
Yes.
Right. Again, so shutter speeds you can control on the mobile. If you go into pro mode, it will allow you to control shutter speeds. Apertures, typically cameras, the cell phones, unless you do like really root it and all, they will not allow you to control the aperture. Apertures are normally fixed. Okay. Okay, so the next component is ISO. Any guesses on what ISO stands for? I'm sure everybody has heard of it.
That standard, I don't know if
Yes.
that standard ISO.
So it is International Standards Organization, right? So yeah. So ISO, so shutter speed was what, right? Shutter speed was how long, correct? Aperture was how much. ISO is the sensitivity of the sensor. So it is how much do I perceive. So I have really dilated my cornea and I am getting a lot of light in, but my retina, right? How sensitive is it to light? So I'm getting light in, but if I'm like my retina is hardened out and I can't see if I'm getting my biology right, so how sensitive is the sensor? That is what ISO is. So to give you an example, think of your headphones, right? When you're like, say if you want to pick up small noises, then you try to increase the volume, right? And it kind of increases how sensitive the headphones are to that sound, and you start hearing smaller and smaller noises. So ISO is the sensitivity of that sensor we discussed in detail, right? So previously, I'm sure you guys have seen these films. Some of you might have seen images. It used to have this number 100, 200, 400. These are called speed of the film. These were basically the how sensitive the film was to light. Nowadays, of course, you get like how sensitive is the sensor, right? So you can change it electronically. Previously, if you were stuck with, say, you selected ISO, say the 200 speed film, till you have utilized all of it, you can't change the film. But now you can electronically go and change the ISO in your camera to suit your situation, right? So what does it mean, right? So this is essentially ISO 100. is the darkest. Then you have ISO 200, ISO 400, ISO 800, and it keeps going, right? What it means is that from ISO 100 to 200, the amount of light doubles. So the camera sensor sensitivity doubles, right? So from 200 to 400 to 800 to 1600, the sensitivity of the sensor that we discussed, right, doubles. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So have you guys seen noise happening in images that you have taken during a party, or like at late night, you see this grain in your image? Has that happened to you?
Yes, yes, Atul. I did not
Anybody,
know the reason, but it has happened.
anybody else?
I'm a little
Never.
unclear on what do you mean by noise in an image, actually. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Have you seen like speckled dots, red dots, blue dots in a image? Say if you've taken something at night and it has this distorted dots in the image, like a noise.
Like the
Ever?
static in the TV.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you've not seen? It's fine. No problem.
It's okay.
Like
Yeah.
that's fine. I mean,
Hmm.
if there is maybe others who have Neeraj or anybody else who's been taking photos, have you guys ever noticed
Yeah,
that
Atul.
if you take photos in the night, it has noise in it, it has these speckles, it has dots, it is grainy?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So
I generally used to attribute, I've seen it, I think, but I used to attribute that to poor megapixels, thinking that the camera quality was poor. Did not know that it had anything to do with the fact that it was being clicked at night, actually.
right. So okay, let me. I think I need to maybe give you an example. Let me. No
Sorry,
problem.
man.
Let me.
Yeah.
No, no, not an issue. Since you're the only one who has unmuted the mic, I will show you an example.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Are you taking a picture at this time?
No, no, I'm just. Do you see this image?
Mm.
Mhm.
Do you see
See it.
how it is grainy?
Correct, correct, correct.
Yeah.
On the sides,
Now,
especially. Correct.
yeah. So, like, even if you actually slightly zoom in, right? Do you see now how much
Yes, yes,
Distortion.
yes.
grain there is?
See it. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So this is not due to like this would have been what some 26 megapixel DSLR with a 35mm prime that shot it, but
Wow.
so now that we know what noise is, right? Any
Yeah.
guesses on why it happens? Any electronic engineers in the? None. Okay, no problem. So this is what. Sorry. So this is what, so there is something known as signal to noise ratio, right? So again, to give you an example of your headphones that you use, if you pump up the volume really, really high on cheap headphones, what happens? Somebody has to tell
Oh,
me what happens.
It's
yeah,
stop.
then
It
distortion
starts
will come in the noise.
distortion,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So how does that distort, right? What is happening?
Actually,
Basically,
the mic is.
yeah.
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
think that that's because the mic is sensitive to high volume, and which is why you hear the disturbance as well.
Yes. So which is correct. So the sensitivity, right? So that is what is triggering the distortion. So, but even say if it is sensitive, that's fine, right? But then where does this suddenly this noise, like where does that kirr sound and this suddenly these dots in the image come from, right? So
Mm.
I mean, let me answer this. All electronic machinery, right, creates electromagnetic waves, right? That's why people say don't keep your phone near your heart and all those things, right? So they create some
Mm.
amount of basic electromagnetic waves. So the wire that is running behind the sensor, all the circuitry, which is the LCD monitor, all of it, right, creates electromagnetic waves, correct? That electromagnetic wave is a base level interference that is always going to be there with any electronic device. Now, the better quality the device is, the more insulated it will be from that noise. Okay, but that always exists. So now what happens is, when you look at an image which is well lit, right? Say take good light, ISO 100. You have, remember that example I gave, like how I told you that it is basically photons which are getting converted into electrons, right? And you are then getting basically an intensity of light. Now say you get a reading of 9 on that photo site. You will get a reading of 1 additionally as noise, right? This is the interference of the electric circuitry that is there in your camera. Make sense?
Yep.
Now imagine it is bad light and you get only 3 photons, right? Very less light. So you get only less intensity of light. What is happening? The noise is remaining the same, right? Because it has actually nothing to do with how much light is there, right? So what is happening? Your signal to noise ratio essentially from 9:1 goes to 3:1. Right? That is why your image starts pixelating, because that noise starts showing up rather than the color that the sensor has captured. Make sense?
Makes sense.
So now assume, so this was at ISO 100. Now I said, okay, no, I need to have a bright enough rainbow, right? I can't have a rainbow looking like this. I need a bright enough rainbow, right? So I pump it up to say ISO 100 to ISO 300. Although most cameras won't let you do it, but theoretically for ease of maths, let's assume it is ISO 300. What has happened? I scale this up, right, into 3. 3 into 9. Sorry, 3 into 3, 9. The noise scales up also 3 times.
Correct.
Right. So every time you are scaling up increasing the ISO, what is happening is the noise also scales. And hence, on poor light conditions, you see more and more noise in your image, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah. So, I mean, so basically understand this. Yeah.
So Atul, now in this example, you also, so the best possible image that I see in the examples you've shown is ISO 1600, right? So
Yeah.
if you use an ISO 1600, and if
Yeah.
you were to click a picture in let's say bad light or dark light, are you
Yeah.
saying the noise will also scale up 16 times?
Yes, not 16
Okay.
times. It will double. So this is 100, this is 200, 400. So these are all double the exposure, right? Double the
All right.
amount of light.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
But don't shoot at ISO 1600. That is not the point here.
Okay.
So I will get to what you want to do, right? Let's but I just wanted you to understand what an ISO is, right? So if you understand what ISO is, it is the sensitivity of the sensor, which you can electronically control. You can tell the sensor, please be more sensitive to light because there is not enough ambient light around. Make sense?
All right.
Right. So shutter speed was how long, aperture was how much, and this is how much you actually perceive, right? How much does actually get recorded. Okay.
Yep.
So if you get all these 3, right? So there is something known as an exposure triangle. So why am I doing all this, right? Why am I doing aperture? Why am I doing shutter speed, brightness? Is to get a correctly exposed image, right? Where I can see things I want to see, right? I want to see this rainbow, right? Yeah. So basically the exposure that the camera captures is a function of the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. So the bigger the aperture, more light it captures. The slower the aperture, the slower the shutter speed, more light it will capture. And the higher the ISO, more light it will capture. Now, as a photographer, what is your job is to make compromises, right? You will say, okay, I need it to be sharp, right? I need the eagle to be sharp. So I need to be somewhere here, right? Now, if I have to be here, I need to be here. I can't be here. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
moment I am
Yep.
here at 1/250th, the amount of light has reduced. Right? The light is reducing
Right.
here because brightness is growing like this, right? So basically this is less bright. So if this is less bright, as a photographer, I need to make sure I am controlling either this or this to make it bright enough. Do you get it?
Right.
So what I would do is I would try and play with this. Now, the problem with this is that if I want to get an lens which is say f2, say 200 mm 5.6 lens, right? Say it cost you 15,000 rupees. This might cost you in the vicinity of 2 lakhs,
Wow.
right? So like I said, the amount of glass required, right? So something like a 300 f2, you should Google it. It is a piece of art, but it's extremely expensive, right? So you may not have this choice, right? So your lens might be stuck here. So your lens is stuck here. You need this. You need this speed. What can you play with? You can play with the ISO, right? You can go to say 400 because you know that 100 is the cleanest image that you will get, right? No noise. Correct?
Correct.
But if you go to 400, maybe it is manageable. So you get a correct exposure. Does that kind of make sense now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay. So again, the image on the right? Does anybody want to venture a guess of what it is? It has nothing to do with photography.
RPM?
I said it has nothing to do with photography.
RPM in kilometers per hour. Is that?
Yes. So this is
Or-
Maruti Suzuki Swift's gear ratios.
Okay.
The reason I'm showing it here, right, is saying
Yeah.
so first gear, right? First gear is only this much. Okay.
Mhm.
After 50 kilometers, you need to go to second gear.
Mhm.
Right after so at max you can take it till 100 and then you need to change to third and then fifth, right? I mean, I'm assuming people know how gears work. Do you think of it when you are actually driving a car? Do you think of this graph and
No,
start drawing
not
lines
at
and
all.
you don't,
Not-
right? Similarly, once you start taking photos, you will not think of this in this way, right? You will not think, oh, I need 250, I need 2.8, I need 400, and write it on your chit and take around. That is not how you will photograph anymore. But you need to know these concepts, right? Like the same way you need to know that there is a band in which you need to change gears. You need to understand that there is this things that you can use to get a better exposure, right? So the only reason I put it here is because this is something most of us do without thinking, right? I mean, we drive without, like, we change gears without thinking, right? We don't think that this is the speed, let's change gear, right? Because we keep driving, we know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
We get some kind of signal
Feedback.
or
Yes.
like some intuition that now we need to change gear.
Change gear, right? So
Fitting
correct,
something.
exactly. You can feel it, right? When you're driving, you feel it and you change it. Same is the case here. You don't even need to feel it. You can actually see it nowadays with the LCD. Imagine 40 years back when you could only do it after the print was made. But now you can just look at it and say that, oh, sorry, I have I have like a shaky image. I need to increase shutter speed, right? Or it is dark. I need to increase aperture, right? You can do it right off the LCD now. Make sense?
Mm.
So if you take a shot, you can just change stuff. You don't need to like learn anything, right? You don't need to know what is the exact number. Although being in the vicinity will help. Otherwise, it's like any other physics experiment, right? I mean, you change numbers, you will get to the result, right?
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Trial and error.
I am at 8 o'clock. So this is just an example of exposure, right? This is lack of exposure and this is correct exposure. So you have to change one of these parameters to get to this, right? So that is, I think, what I wanted to kind of convey.
So the image to the left would actually be, let's say if I keep the ISO and shutter speed constant,
Yeah.
the image on the left has a bigger aperture as
Yes,
opposed to the one on the right, right?
Exactly.
Correct.
Exactly.
Correct. Yeah.
So let me just take another 5 minutes. So I wanted to discuss this, but I'll just leave it. Let's discuss this so that everybody understand what this is. I hope people have seen this on cameras,
Yes, many times.
right?
When
So
I was young, for me those were only icons that I used to love playing around with.
right.
Yeah,
So yeah.
amused.
So let me just quickly go through this, and then if there are questions, I can take. There were some more slides, but I think we are at the top of the hour. Uh, all this, right? All this is auto, right? So all this is like how your phone works. There is some, and this is the Nikon dial. Similar dials exist for Canon, Sony, etc. All this is auto. This is also auto, right? So the camera decides everything. So you say, I want to take sports photography. Camera will decide, oh, you need a high shutter speed. Set a high shutter speed. Take a photo. Make sense? Right? You say, I want a landscape. Camera will decide, oh, you need a smaller aperture to get greater depth of field. It will do that. You say you're taking a portrait, it will try and identify a face, blur everything else, right? The same way your camera phone works. Got it?
Correct.
So I'm not going to get into details. I mean, these are like I said, this if you're going to use this, then stick to your phone. They do a much better job than you would ever be able to get with this entire thing happening. Let's talk about shutter priority, right? The first one, which is S. Typically, they will be either S, SV, some option like that. So what is shutter priority? Shutter priority is a mode where the photographer decides the shutter. Okay.
Okay.
So I decide how fast my shutter needs to be. The camera decides the aperture. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if, for example, camera has decided that I need to expose this image and get, say, 10 lumen of light, I, as a photographer, can say what is the shutter speed that I want. And the camera will decide what is the aperture required to get these 10 lumens of light, assuming the ISO is constant.
Correct.
Yeah. When do you use it, right? When do you have this situation? When will you be on shutter priority mode?
Wildlife photography.
Correct. So wildlife, sport, I would say anything fast moving, right? Even, for example, something like I wanted to say Splash, but Splash has other issues with using shutter priority. But say wildlife and sports, right? Those kind of situations where it is fast moving action, you want to be at a bare minimum shutter speed. Otherwise, the image is completely of no use. You need to be on shutter priority mode. Make sense?
Yeah.
This image that I did not show you, for example, I needed to be, this is the shutter speed, 106 seconds. So that is, the shutter was all open for almost 1.5 minutes for me to get these trails, right?
Yep.
Right. So if you need high shutter speed or very low shutter speed, you need shutter priority.
Exactly, right? So when you want to control the shutter speed, you want to be on shutter priority, right? So you, as a photographer, are prioritizing shutter speed. Yeah.
So Atul, when you prioritize the shutter speed, let's say you have mentioned that this is the X shutter speed that I want my camera to be in.
Yes.
The camera will automatically automatically select the aperture and aperture, right? In that.
Yes.
Will be adjusted.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So these, you want to use this only in this kind of scenario where you want to freeze action, right? Typically, I will say this is the least used mode unless you are doing, like I showed you, very slow shutters. For fast shutters, I would not use this mode though. There is a reason, I'll tell you later. Okay. If I get time though. So, but for slow shutters, right, where you want slow shutter, where you want the water to be silky smooth, where you want to capture light trails, you need to control the shutter and you get this effect. Yeah.
Okay.
Just to give you one more trivia with this, right? So how did these lines come about? Any guesses?
Yeah, I was about to ask that question actually. So did you move your camera a little bit, moving
No.
some direction?
No.
No,
So
no,
the camera was on a tripod. See, if the camera moved, right, everything would have moved. Even all the
Correct.
static stuff would have moved, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
So to get this,
someone is moving with a light.
yes, somebody was moving with a light, right? But then that person is not in the image,
Correct.
Mm.
right? I did not Photoshop that person out of the image.
Mm.
So how did that person disappear?
Because they are moving really fast.
No.
Jugnu hai kya ye?
No, so I will tell you what is happening, right? The way to, and imagine the uses of this, right? Imagine you are at Taj Mahal full of people, right? All tourists. But you want to get only the Taj Mahal, right? You don't want all the tourists standing in front of the Taj Mahal, right?
Correct.
Is there a way to remove all the people and just get Taj Mahal, right? So this is when you need a very, very slow shutter speed. What is happening, right? The same logic I explained about the sensor. The light that is coming out of this torch is registering electrons in the sensor, right? My friend who was wearing black is walking around. Okay.
Oh.
But he is not registering enough on the sensor. He's there, but he's not registering enough. So he's almost disappeared. Make sense?
Yeah.
If he were standing here, right, and constantly registering light for 1.5 minutes, you would have seen him. But what has happened on that 1.5 minutes, there were other things which were brighter, which were registering, and he was just walking at a normal pace, and he was not registering, and that is why he walked around it 3 times, but he's not registered. Make sense? So if you are at Taj Mahal next time and you want to remove all the people, you need to get a tripod, put it on a slow shutter speed. There is one more challenge that you will face with it, but when you try it, you will know. I won't tell you now. Put it on a slow shutter speed and take the image. People who are moving out of the scene, right? People are not standing there, right? They will keep moving. If somebody decides to stand there, he is going to come. But if people are moving about, they will all disappear and you will get a clean shot of Taj Mahal. So if you take something like say 2 minutes or 3 minutes open shutter, you will get a clean image of Taj Mahal, right? The issue that I was talking about is that obviously your exposure will go way up, right? Everything will become white. So you will need to have a way of controlling the exposure, right? So that's what I don't want to get into right now, but there is a way to do that. You can Google it and, get to that. But anyway, so what I was saying is shutter priority, right? So typically used, especially when you want slow shutter. When you start off, you think this is what you want to use when you are using fast shutter. But typically slow shutter is when you actually want to use it. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Aperture priority, right? Aperture priority is typically the default setting that I normally carry my camera in. If I'm walking around, I'm on a trip, I am traveling, I'm taking wildlife. I won't say wildlife, sorry, but anything else, right, is normally on aperture priority, where I have decided what the aperture should be, right? And the camera decides what the shutter speed should be. Okay. Now, for example, why do I need to control aperture, right? Because aperture controls the creative part of the photo, right? What is in focus? How much is in focus? All that is controlled by the aperture. So imagine if your aperture is changing, then what you are actually seeing and what you are hoping to get will be different. Does it make any sense at all, or have I lost everybody now? I think I've lost Abhishek.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So let me just quickly go back to the dog. Right,
Yeah,
this
I was
photo,
going to say that. Yeah.
Now I want to make it all creamy, white, blurred, nice photo, right? That is what I want to do. Yeah. So
Hmm.
I set the aperture at this, like at a really large aperture,
Right.
right? And the camera said, okay, if this is your aperture, then this is the shutter speed. Please take the photo. I took a photo and I got this. Now, assuming I had set a shutter speed for this, what would happen? I say okay, I need 1 by 1/25th of a second shutter speed, right? Camera will say, oh, for this you need a small aperture. Everything would have been in focus. And this photo would not be what it is. It would have been a photo of any dog, right?
Correct.
So when you're walking around on the street trying to capture stuff, aperture priority makes sense because you will not, like, you can quickly change the aperture, change the entire look of the image, get the image that you want, right? So aperture priority normally is the walk around priority, like setting that you want to. So you leave it at A, aperture priority, and walk around, understand that this is what you're controlling, right? If it is getting too dark, one stop of aperture will double the light, right? So it is much easier to control it that way also. So the light you can control easy, plus the depth of field you can control much easier if you know how to control aperture priority. Make sense?
Yep.
All right. Then there is this complete manual mode, right? Complete manual mode is basically you select both. You say, okay, I need 10 lumens of light. I will set shutter speed. I will set aperture also, right? So your camera comes in built with a light meter. So I don't know if you have ever seen in movies, people taking photos of models, they will go and there is somebody holding up something in front of the face and saying, this is the reading. So there used to be this thing called as a light meter, which will tell you how much light is falling. And accordingly, photographers used to have the cheat sheet and say, okay, this much light. So this is my setting, dial it into the camera and then take a photo, right? I mean, that used to be the thing that used to happen some time back. Even now, if you're in a studio, you might do it. But now your cameras come inbuilt with this light meter. This is what you will see on the back of your camera when you look at it. It tells you, so 0 is where it wants to be. This is too dark, negative. This is too bright. So it wants to be here. Now you can adjust this and this or this to be here somewhere, right? So all the dials that you see photographers turning when they're trying to take a photo is essentially trying to adjust these three values to get here somewhere, right? So the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO, right? These are the three things that you're trying to control to get to a correctly exposed photo. Does it make sense? So manual mode, camera said, okay, boss, you are going manual, you decide what you want to do, select the shutter speed, select the aperture, and whatever you get is what you get. But I will tell you whether it is getting too dark or too bright. But you decide, right? There is an image, like I said, the first image that I showed, if I just wanted the eyes to show, right? Maybe I will then expose to the dark side where everything else is dark and the whites are just showing, right? So that is the manual mode. Any questions on the manual mode? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's really
Yep.
difficult for a layman, right, who is not a professional photographer.
Actually, once you start doing it, it is not, because like I said, when you look through the viewfinder, this is the view that you see, right?
Hmm,
So, so moment you make this, say, for example, this is too dark, right now. So if I made this, say, 1 second, suddenly the dial will come here. If I made it 0.2, say 2 seconds, the dial will come here. And you know that, okay, you have got correct exposure, right? So it is actually not very complicated. The only problem with it is slow. So if you are in a street and you want to take some photos, if you sit around trying to dial in all the measurements, it's just slow, and people get conscious of the photo, right? I mean, imagine if somebody is taking a photo and it takes like half an hour to set everything up, right? You are like really conscious holding that pose, right? So manual mode is slower in that sense, but manual mode is easier. It's not that complicated. So if you're doing something like product photography, if you're doing food photography, if you're doing photo shoots in a studio, you can use manual mode very easily. Landscape photography, you can use manual mode because nothing is really changing, right? You put it on a tripod and you can set it to your heart's content and get a photo. Yeah. So manual mode works in those situations. Surprisingly, manual mode also works in sports and wildlife photography. If anybody wants to venture a guess why, there is a free giveaway.
Because as I understood that manual mode is wherever your subject can wait, so that you can basically set things. So
Yeah, but if you look at wildlife and sports, right?
yeah, but
both of them are fast action things, right?
yeah, but
So
you already know some things, so you basically preset few values, like 2 values, but you can change the third value, so you can decide on which value you want to preset, so
you
that
are
you can
you are extremely close, but not close enough for me to give you a free giveaway. All right. So I'll tell you how it works. It's a good guess, Abhishek. It's a really good guess. The eagle photo, right? The one. Can I just maybe? This will be the last. After that, I'll take some questions maybe. So this photo, right? I know it is not that I was walking around and then I said, okay, oh, there is an eagle. Let me take a photo of an eagle, right? That is not how this worked, correct? I am sitting there waiting for the eagle to come. You get me? Right? And I know that if I have to get an eagle sharp enough, then I need to be at say 1/3600 of a second speed. So my shutter speed is fixed. I have decided, correct? I also don't want all this junk to be in focus, right? I don't like this, all this. Actually, if you look at it, I've cleaned it up a bit, but you can see plastic here. There's a lot of plastic and waste and all that stuff happening, right? I don't want that in focus. So what do I need to do? I need a shallow depth of field, right? So I said, okay, the lens that I had at that day supports f4, for example. So I said, this is the lowest or the largest aperture I can use. So I have set my aperture also. So now I set my shutter speed, I've set my aperture, correct? What is the other thing that I've left with?
ISO.
ISO, right?
Yeah.
What do I do with ISO? I don't want to, and typically ISOs on cameras, if you notice, will not have a separate dial that you can just quickly change. And especially when the eagle is swooping in, I can't pick an ISO at that point of time, right? I can't say, oh, eagle aa gaya. Now it is too dark. Let me go to ISO 400. Eagle will go by then, right? So I cannot physically change ISO at that point of time, right? So really what I want is I need the camera to pick an ISO for me at that point of time. Make sense?
Right.
Right. So this is a technique called as shooting action in using manual mode with auto ISO. So a lot of cameras now offer you an option of auto ISO where you set the ISO to the base ISO. So say example, ISO 100 is the lowest. You set it at that, right? Depending on the scene, the camera will, when you press the shutter, decide what the ISO should be and take a photo, right?
Right.
And because the cameras today are really advanced, the noise handling, like I said, has become better. So even photos at ISO 3200, etc. are usable. So this would be something like ISO 1600. And if you look at it, there is some grain. If you really zoom into it, there are some grains and, it is slightly grainy. But the choice you are making as a photographer is whether you get a grainy, sharp image or you don't get that image. Right? So this is a technique you can use for fast moving action where you want to compose also artistically. Right? Otherwise, shutter's priority, like all beginners normally will go and do shutter priority, where I will say, okay, football or tennis ball or the eagle is sharp, right? So yeah, I've got the eagle sharp. But what is happening if I have to get this sharp? It might have like a really non-blurred background, right? And it doesn't give you that effect. But I want the background also blur. I want the image sharp. I want the background blur. Then this is a good option to try out, right? Where you move everything to manual, put your ISO to auto. Yeah.
Right.
And the camera decides in flight what the ISO should be, and you get a perfectly exposed image. There are some more things to it, but like when you start doing it, you will get to it, right? I
So
think, yeah.
basically,
Sorry.
on one time we don't decide anything. That's what you're saying. 2 preset and 1 auto.
Yes, exactly, right? And preset is based on experience, right? You know, right? If you want to shoot hummingbirds, you should know what is the range that you need to be in, correct? Otherwise, you're not going to be there, right? So that's why I said, like when you're shooting those kind of things, experience matters, that you have done this before, right? If you have driven that car before, you will know what to do. If you have not, if you move to a new car altogether, you will break the gearbox, right? So that's the thing, right? So if you keep shooting, you know, okay, this is the ISO this is the shutter speed that I need to be at. I need to be shallow so that I can get good creamy background, and then I pick an ISO. I don't really care because I spend money on the camera to handle the ISO part of it. Yeah.
Got it. Got it.
I think I'm really over time, so I will not go through the rest of it. But yeah, I think that was it. Is there, I know there was an initial question on product photography. I just want to answer some questions if that's a question. If I just wanted to maybe just quickly answer some questions there. Otherwise, if there are any other questions, I can.
Yeah, definitely. I think, guys, please unmute yourself and ask if you have any question.
Atul, there is one thing. I was reading there are some mirrorless cameras are also coming.
Yes.
What exactly that? I mean, in terms of.
You joined late, Neeraj.
Okay.
So,
Oh, sorry. You
but
already
I will,
explained.
yeah, but I will. Is
That's
there
fine.
any other question? And otherwise, Neeraj, I can come back to you on that.
Okay.
So I have a question. So when you decide to buy a camera, or let's say just take a really simple example. If you want to buy a phone for a camera, so what are the things that you have to look? So I understood that the range of aperture is one way to look at it. But what other? So because I understand that megapixel doesn't make really that much sense. But what else you need?
Why do you think megapixel doesn't make sense?
Yeah, because I have seen like I have used that Nokia Lumia lenses as well, which had like really big megapixels, but they were not as good as let's say an iPhone camera at that time, and with low megapixels.
Yeah. So again, I will try to be as brief as possible. Two reasons, right? So two things impact. So firstly, to answer why megapixels don't really matter much, right? This is an image of the sensors. If you look at it, so this is where your iPhone, Galaxy, Pixel, all of them reside. Yeah. So this is the size of that sensor. This is the cheapest Nikon DSLRs that you get. Sensor size, only sensor size, right? And these are full frame 35 mm. 35 mm used to be the width of the film that used to go in. So these are full frame 35 mm cameras, sensor size. Yeah. There are bigger. The Hasselblad that I showed you is called medium format. It is 50 mm and above. So what does that mean, right? So when you say 46 megapixels, remember that Bayes metrics that I showed you. Each photo site, right? In this sensor, say if this is 50 megapixels, there are 50 of these, or 50 mega, right? Whatever, 50,000 of them laid out here. So each photo site actually is, say, for example, 30 picometer, for example, right? On an iPhone or a Galaxy S, 50 mm basically means this. Right? They are also cramming in all that because marketing wise, it sounds nice to say I have 50 megapixels lens, right, or a sensor, right? But the size of each of those photo sites are like, say, 0.1 picometer or something like that, right, or nanometer or something like that, right? So the size of that photo site is very, very different, in the magnitudes of 10 times different, right? So what happens is when light falls, the amount of light that this can capture vis-a-vis what this can capture is very different. Yes. Hence, you need more algorithm here to make approximations of what was happening. Whereas here you have actual information without the algorithm. So as algorithms become better, that is why phone cameras are becoming better, right? Because even with that little amount of information with ML, they are able to now understand what is happening. Whereas here with this huge sensor, you are getting real information, right? And you were then able to comprehend what was happening. So that's why megapixels don't really matter. The size of the sensor makes a difference. I wouldn't say megapixels don't matter at all. They matter, but they matter to an extent. If you're going to post on Instagram, Facebook, even a 5 megapixel, 10 megapixel camera is more than enough, right? There are other issues with megapixel. Something like a 100 megapixel camera, for example, or a 50 megapixel camera will be highly unforgiving to any mistake you are going to make. Okay, because it is getting that level of detail. So for example, the dog photo that I showed, if you miss focus of the eye and you are getting focus of the, say, the eyelid or the hair on the eye, your eye is going to be blurred and it will be visible that it is blurred. Smaller megapixel phones or cameras, that mistake now it will, okay, maaf kiya types ho jata hai. So like a Swift, right? If you have a gear problem and you don't put the gear properly, it will make some sound, but it will still go ahead, right? But if you take a very, say 800 horsepower supercar and you miss a gear, it will break the gearbox, right? The same thing. So the higher the megapixels, you have to be good also. Your technique has to be great, right? So, so don't chase megapixels. Now coming back to your question on which camera to buy, is that the question?
Yeah.
Right. I had shown this in the last session. If you are here anywhere here, right, on top, sorry, on this part, getting a good cell phone camera helps. Okay. If you are here where you want to do, I will say, some amount of bird, animal, some football matches, kids, those kind of things, get a bridge camera which has a good super zoom, right? Nikon P27, those kind of things which have like 10x zoom, 20x zoom, 30x zoom. You will enjoy using them, right? Because you will get the photos that you want. You will get the parrot, you will get the eagle, you will be able to get the football, all those things you will be able to get. They are not too big, not too bulky, and the image quality is decent enough for Instagram, Facebook, all those places. Get a DSLR or a mirrorless only if you are in this category and you want to pursue it as a hobby. Okay. So for example, to give you an example, when I am traveling, and I don't know if, say, Dweep is in this call, Dweep walks around with like a 20-liter backpack. Okay. I don't know what he puts in it, but that is all he has for 14 days. I have like a 50-liter backpack where I am carrying all my camera stuff other than my stuff. Right. So you have to make that choice, that are you willing to do that? Are you willing to start carrying your camera everywhere? Otherwise, what is going to happen is you're going to keep your camera at home and walk around with your cell phone anyway. So unless it is a hobby that you are going to seriously pursue, or if there is a requirement to, like if you are a professional at it or whatever, right? And that's a different conversation. Unless it's a hobby, I would suggest invest in a good camera, a good cell phone, which does a lot of these things. It will help. Otherwise, I mean, there are, like we can discuss what you should get if you're into any of these specific things, or you want to get something for your travel. Don't offer to shoot anybody's wedding after 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, or 10 years of photography. Don't offer to shoot anybody's wedding. Wedding photographies are especially complicated. You need to have backup gear, you need to have experience, you need to have a lot of things happening. You need to be an intern first, intern with somebody if you're really interested in that genre. Understand how it works, then get into it. Don't, and especially if you have like an iPad or a cell phone, right? Don't go and stand where the photographer is and start pushing him around and take photos, right? I mean, that's like he's doing a job, right? So don't do weddings. I mean, that is one cardinal rule of this. But is there a specific question on, are you interested in any of these? Are you trying to look at it as a hobby? Then I can tell you what you might want to buy.
Not right now. I was just looking at which phone to take when buying, especially for camera. Like you don't care about anything else, just camera.
I think Pixel right now, so there is something known as a DxOMark. You can Google it. That they benchmark, like how you have Geek benchmarks for CPUs. There's a DxOMark which benchmarks camera sharpness. So DxOMark is that website. Pixel, I think, is on top right now.
Okay.
Again, you won't go wrong with an iPhone or a Pixel top of the range right now from camera quality. Yeah, and like it can do some amazing stuff. It can do some amazing stuff right now because of the AI. But if you're really interested in learning photography, then I would say something like a OnePlus or something Android will be easier because you get a lot of options to hack it, and you can control more on your own, and you can almost get like a camera experience out of it rather than depending on the cell phone to control a lot of these things. But again, a Pro mode helps you control shutter speed, ISO, white balance, focus points. A lot of those things are in Pro mode. You can go and control them.
Yeah, but in default camera, like for example, in my iPhone, it doesn't let me control a lot of things, but which I was able to control in a Lumia phone, or I have a Samsung S20 as well, which lets me control more things. So I like iPhone camera, but it doesn't let me control a lot of things. So
Correct. I mean, that is, I think, the Apple strategy of making it easy for you to do everything without you actually doing it, right? I mean, so yeah. Any other questions? I'm happy to take.
No, Atul, I think people are good. Yeah. But I think we should have one more session, Atul. That's what I feel.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say thank you so much.
Okay. As a parting note, I just wanted to share this. If somebody's interested, I'll share this. You can click on it. This is this photographer, right? And like so these are all types of photography that you could get into if you're interested, right? Like from a hobby and professional. What I wanted to leave you with is this thought, right? This guy across multiple years stood in a museum, took pictures of people in that museum. That's all he did. Yeah. This is the same photographer. And then he waited for somebody with a blue shirt to show up against this blue image, took that photo, waited for this to happen, took this photo, waited for the colored hair against this, matched, and got that photo, right? And there is a series, right? It's not this one photo and he's lucky with it. He got this series of photos, right? And what I wanted to tell you is that whatever genre you pick up, right, you can explore, and like there's so much to do there that like to start off with, just if you start shooting, that's great. But once you get into a genre, right, I mean, there is like a lot that you can do within that genre, right? And especially for people who are not artistic, right? I mean, people who can't draw, sing, those kind of things, right? This is a good genre because it has a lot of science in it, right? It's like, I hope that came out when I spoke about it. There's a lot of science in it, a lot of dependability, right? It's not like painting that, okay, I don't know how my painting is going to come out. I know how my photo is going to come out. But there is a lot you can do with it and then start playing with it. So I just wanted to leave you with this image series. I was really impressed with the patience and the dedication this guy showed. But with any genre, right, there is like depth to it. What you can do with food, what you can do with product, with macro, so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. But I never thought that this is a matter of patience and all, and people must be waiting this thing to happen. I used to think that something is happening and people are, clicking the photo on runtime. But I think this is an interesting fact to know about photography. Yeah.
Yeah, they are lucky or something.
So, yeah, thank you so much, Atul, and thank you everyone, I would say, for joining. I have just one thing to share. Uh, uh, I don't know. There is a.
Yeah, I think Priyadarshan is asking a question.
No. I just wanted to express my, appreciation. It's a really, top quality content. I never expected. I just came, as some, maybe as a hobby they are doing this, but once I started to, listen to the, like it's really top quality. So yeah, that's it. So I just wanted to,
Hey,
thank you for that. Yeah.
Thanks, Priyadarshan. Thanks.
Yeah, guys. So actually, every Saturday, 7 to 8 p.m., we do a webinar or a open discussion. Actually, we are encouraging people to share their knowledge, expertise with others for free. And we started this initiative during pandemic itself because everyone was having some time which they could spend with others. So that is the motto behind this. Also, one more thing I want to highlight. Let's say if you liked it and you want to know more about this, you want to have one-on-one with Atul, for example. So you can go to our website. There you can also schedule one-on-one with any of the mentor for any given topic. So basically, these are the two pattern or format we are following. We are having this webinar and open discussion, and also we have made an arrangement wherein you can schedule one-on-one with any of the mentors who have joined our open mentoring group. Also, I will request if you guys are interested to share your expertise with others, please go to our website and register yourself. We will onboard you as a mentor, and you can also talk to people and share your knowledge with others. We are also recording this session, so these are available on our YouTube channel, so that if you want to, if you missed any session by any chance, you can go and look at it. We are posting our events on Meetup. We have a group on Meetup, so there, if you want, you can subscribe and you will get the notification of all the webinar which is happening. So that is there, and also we are available on all the social media platforms, and we are also putting content out. So that's it. I would thank you so much, everyone. I think we are over 40 minutes. Usually we do 7 to 8, but I think the content was so interesting. We kind of, so yeah, Atul, thank you so much. I would say thank you so much for this. Now I understand photography in much better way, and I hope others as well. So,
Thanks. I'm sorry I was, I think, really tardy with time this time though.
no, but I
Last
think
time,
it's good.
last time I was dot at 8 I finished, yeah. So,
Yeah, but I would say it was interesting, and I'm hoping that we'll have a part 3 of this.
let's see.
Because, yeah. Okay. I think, yeah. If somebody has anything to say, please do.
Yeah, I think
Thank you, Atul.
next. Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Ganesh. I think there is a feedback link Om has shared. If you guys can share feedback, that'd be great. And next week, I think we are doing a session on event-driven architecture and monitoring. So it'll be more IT and tech specific. But if anybody is interested, please do join. Details will be on the links Om is sharing. So yeah.
Yeah. I would say maybe we can stay on the bridge for a minute or two so that you can get so that you guys can click on the link, and because once we close the meeting, that link will go away. So that really helps. Actually, we are just asking that how meaningful was the session, if you would be interested in one-on-one with a particular mentor. And third is, if you have any topic in mind, then please help us with that. So we'll try and find a mentor for the session. Yeah. So yeah, thank you all. Good night. Have a good weekend ahead. Maybe Sunday, I would say. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Atul.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Yeah. Bye, guys. Thanks.